Everyone. I'm Bob Martin. I'm going to talk to you about an effort that MITRE has been pursuing for the last year and hopefully show how it intertwines with the work on trustworthiness in the IIC's efforts. If I only had one slide to give, I would offer this one. And if you think of the different parts of organizations, of the marketplace, of your partners and your customers, the Legos on the right are all those elements. And the idea of a system of trust is how you knit those together into a seamless and contiguous ability. Obviously, it takes going through a third dimension or a fifth dimension, but I think you get the idea. Someone's got an open mic. Do that. Thank you. So, what are the issues that we're trying to address when we talk about supply chain and trust? You have people who are trying to offer or buy just commercial ICT, you've got people who are offering or buying large, items that have some software and networking capabilities. You have people that are worried about counterfeit hardware or software. You're trying to understand how to purchase or verify that you have trustworthy software or hardware, or that how do you show to someone that you're offering such. You also have analysts out there who are trying to do assessments and help guide customers or companies. And then, of course, you have those trying to buy and sell these items. And I would say you also have the outsourced service segment, and that's pretty much where the IIC's trustworthiness scopes and includes. But I would offer that there's also the supplier. And so when I talk about the trust and system of trust, I'm talking about all the either in scope or abstraction or in the language they use to express it, whether they're trying to convince someone about their trustworthiness or they're asking about some element of it, of those in the supply chain, because we're all in supply chains. Either we're at one end or the other or in the middle. So the system of trust, hopefully, will at least address some of this. So as a little bit of background, logistics and buying and selling, shipping things and doing that in a secure way and a trusted way really has been around for quite a while. It's evolved, as has the whole acquisition procurement environment and the requirements on them from either legal or statutory type regimes or just good practice in your company. But as more and more systems have IT and ICT elements, software and software enabled capabilities, you also then need to bring your operations and risk management people more fully into this. I mean, obviously they were there for the safety and the training and issues for all kinds of systems, but now there's new elements of that equation, as is your cyber and cyber risk management, because now these are on your networks. They have access and are interconnected with many of your business systems. And there's really this whole new area then of supply chain risk management of cyber enabled things. And there's new capabilities, new risks, new ways of dealing with them. So this is just another kind of context for when we talk about trustworthy supplies and supply chains. So within MITRE, our primary focus is with U.S. government customers, but many of those customers, their focus is on parts of the critical infrastructure and the industries that support our different parts of society. So we have been looking at this, and many of our customers have been looking at this, and many of those in the industry have been looking at this, but they've been doing it in a very focused, problem-driven way. And so what we want to do is move to something that is more comprehensive, more complete, so that when you try to address this, you're not missing parts, you're not forgetting things in the rush. And that's really a big focus of this. So when we talk about the system of trust, we basically have two major thrusts. One, leveraging all the work that's out there about supply chain risk, and there's many. Also to leverage our own experience with this over the last 40 years or so, 50 years actually. And so if we want to get it organized though, because many of the different efforts really are narrowly focused, and yet when you step back, you can see that they could fit together. They do come together, and yet they're not that way. So we want to organize it, integrate them, bring them together. But if we do that, we'll end up with a list of approaches and methods that will be very daunting to approach by anyone. So the second thing we need to do is have a way to simplify this, to tailor it down to your specific context, your challenges, the technology, the kinds of organization, the kinds of risks you're facing. So those are the two main areas that we're trying to address. And the basis of this work is the idea of trust. And when we talk about it, we talk about it in three ways: trusting the supply, the item, the component, trusting the suppliers of those components, and trusting the services that are offered. So those we call the aspect. And what's keeping you from trusting a supplier or an item of supply or of service is that you have risk areas, concerns that need to be addressed. You may be worried that the organization supplying you is also supplying your competitor and will give preference to your competitor. So external influence, because maybe your competitor buys more from them, and that could be an issue. So you're worried about external influences. You're worried about organizational stature, and that really means where are the elements of that organization located geographically, geopolitically, environmentally, where transportation issues or things like COVID can interrupt them. So you want to understand where are their different parts and where do they flow, so that you can understand those kinds of issues. Obviously, financial stability, if you pick a supplier, you don't want them to go out of business next month or start, chinching on the quality because of financial pressures. Maliciousness, you basically think of that as, fly-by-night companies out to make a quick profit, or other types of malicious behavior. You definitely want to be aware of that and look for it. Organizational security, whether it's physical security, the networks, all of those aspects. Quality culture is basically whatever you use to select this as a supplier. You'd like to know 2 years, 2 months down the road, they continue to produce a good quality product similar to what you selected them for. So do they have that Do they have QA? Do they have training? Do they have, are they ISO certified and so on? Susceptibility is really about niche players in the market that, by the nature of the product they're offering, if somebody wanted to target somebody in the sector that they are supporting, they would go after that company. So if they are only supporting avionics and somebody wanted to intrude into avionics systems, they would know to target them. Does the company recognize that, and are they doing things to address that? A less complicated but more dire area is the supplies. So it really comes down to hygiene. Do they produce things that are following good hygiene practices? That's whether it's cyber or physical or goods of any kind. Counterfeit, as well as maliciously tainted. And that goes into not only when it's produced, but as it is on its journey to your point of use. So the supply chain, are things tampered with or Trojaned on their way to you. And that could be, if you think back over the last couple of decades, we've had, food stuff that has been tampered with. So it doesn't have to be a, cyber type of taint. And then in some services, it really breaks down to services where they have physical access to your infrastructure, your facilities, and what do you do to identify and manage those risks. And then when you have remote or virtual access. So we're not sitting here saying, oh my God, we have these risks, we can't do anything. We actually can start to manage these and get a handle on them. So there's lots of information and ways of quantifying these areas of risk, determining whether they're real or imagined, and getting down to something you can actually operationally manage with. So all of these areas is where a lot of the work has been done over the last couple of decades on specific types of issues in software, in financial stability of companies, in service offerings. So all of these are what we're collecting and organizing and structuring. So let me just give you a quick example of a supplier. We're worried about external influence, so we want to look at ownership. So we have a mind map. This is just the top couple levels. That is, the same, sorry, that's this area. Now, when we talk about the IIC, this mind map, I think the areas of interest are these. So on the right is about the physical, the real system, the cyber and physical, the products. And down on the bottom middle in the light blue line is services. And then over on the far left is the quality culture and their ability to produce. So many of these others, I don't think intersect with how IIC is focused in trustworthiness, but I think we need to paint this bigger picture, show the context of what the IIC is addressing while acknowledging the others, but not necessarily, trying to address them directly. So one of the other things that I think intersects with the IIC is the idea that, you're going to have to bring evidence together to support these reasons for trusting, whether it's the product or the service. So here's an example of things that you could bring together to trust software. And in the best practice paper on trustworthy software, we talked about this, and that's available up on the IIC website. In hardware, there's a similar thing. If you think about it from a reliability engineering point of view, it really makes sense. What are the materials I'm using? Are the things put together so that they run safely? And just think about all the things that you would want to show the system is capable of doing safely or securely or reliably, and how do I actually show that that's true? And how do I offer that up when I'm a supplier? or how do I ask for it when I'm the customer? So assurance cases is one of the things that I think can help you do that in a more repeatable way rather than a one-on-one discussion. And the idea being that you have claims about your system. There's assumptions and prerequisites around that claim. So it's not that you're promising the thing will work in all conditions. And then how do you break that down into things that you can show evidence to prove that you've, in some version of the word prove, or at least support with evidence that what you've done. So the idea here is that if all these little circles were the different parts of a system and each had an assurance case from their different suppliers, you could actually integrate them together if you made sure that those assumptions and prerequisites were fulfilled by the parent system for the underlying systems, and then all of the claims should still hold. So that's the general quick version of how I think assurance cases and the trustworthiness of products and services could actually intersect with the system of trust work that MITRE is doing. The idea being that whether you're getting hardware or software or services, if they came with assurance cases, then building an assured and trustworthy supply chain and using that to assemble a trustworthy system would be much more disciplined, much more engineered and predictable. So let me go back to the system of trust. Up in the upper left was that mind map I showed you. There's a data model behind that. We've got a prototype environment that has a front end, a database, and an application. The bottom line is we're using that to build our content. But when we're done, you can either do an assessment in that environment, or we can output a spreadsheet where you could take it to any environment you want, because once you start filling out an assessment, you're actually going to have very privileged information. And so we thought a spreadsheet would be the most mobile, securable way of doing that in the initial steps. But we're also putting together ways of showing the results and findings. And so that's what that example is. I'm going to walk through one specifically coming up. This is what the tool looks like. It's a web app, front end to the applications. But basically, then the spreadsheet version, basically looks like this. The key is the different probing questions are in red, and on the far right are you answer yes or no to these, so you get it all together and you have a result. So how would you actually use such a thing? Remember I talked about how if we organized all of this, it would be a daunting amount of information and process and procedures. So we have this concept of profiles where you can set that into something appropriate. So let's say that I am interested in suppliers. I'm a part of the US federal government. I only want to use open source and purchase data, and I need to do this in hours. And I'm willing to pay money for that data. So that would basically go out and pre-select a much smaller set of the overall system of trust that fit these criteria. And then the idea being that, for that particular set, that's these branches, if you can see the color-coded circles. And it's actually, now I'm digging down to a couple more levels. It's these 26 measures that are answerable with data that you can get and have within hours. So this is what we did in one of our pilots. And here's an example. We did it for 11 companies. And you can see we have differentiating results. These are the actual parts that those 26 I talked about. So in looking at suppliers, this is 5 of the 7 areas that I walked through. So the financial stability, organizational security, maliciousness, external influences, and the organizational stature. So this is a little bit overwhelming, but if you just look at the blue and the top left versus the bottom right, you can see that the area covered by the lines in blue is much bigger in the bottom right. That's basically showing your risk surface area. And you can definitely see a difference in the profiles of these different companies. But let's dig into one of them with some specificity. So here's this particular organization, and I wanted to just dig into the details. The criteria for these will be available as we publish this, but basically you can see that there's very little concern from external influence, but their financial stability has some hot spots. Their organizational stature is basically, good to moderate, but there's one hot spot there. And they're not looking very malicious, but there's one thing of concern there. But boy, they seem to have some trouble with their organizational security. So this would give you a quick way of digging in, and depending what you wanted this company to do, these different areas of findings may or may not be a hot button. But this is a way of getting into data that a lot of companies don't use to look at other trading partners. Some do, the more sophisticated ones. We want to make that a norm, something that anyone can do. So how did we answer those questions? Well, on the left is 72 different data sources that we've identified. The way to read this is the columns are those different concern areas. So what I just showed you, these are the color-coded ones that we just talked about. And from the service area, from the supplier area, sorry, and the 2 missing ones. And then these are the actual data sources that we used. So you can see we used many, but we didn't use them all, and they're pretty available. So in closing, I wanted to offer up, these are the kinds of data sources we have. We also are going through and asking people that have insights that would like to share them with us about things that work, things that don't work. We'll sign a unilateral NDA. The idea being to bring into the system of trust the knowledge and approaches of as many people as we can. We can also put your stuff in with acknowledgement if you want that, but we found that offering an NDA where the purpose is to get that information and put it in anonymously for the better of the overall effort seems to be very popular, and we've used that on community efforts in the past. So what we want to do when we're done is be able to have organizations do assessments across all of the dozen areas of risk and understand what the different things they're looking at, whether it's products, services, suppliers, or some mixture, so that they can have a standard approach to doing this rather than everybody ginning up their own approach and every organization having to answer to all of those different ways of looking at it. If you're familiar in the accounting world, there's the generally accepted accounting practices, and all accountants, all people doing finance, they kind of start with that and then pick the things that are appropriate. We're looking to do the same kind of thing in supply chain and supply chain security, so that the playing field, what is known, what is the good practice, expected practice, is well described and the vocabulary is well understood. And now it's just a matter of working with those that you want to as a partner or as a customer from there forward. So we've done a lot this first year. It looks like we're going to get our second year of funding And we've also gone out and talked to a lot of groups about this idea, both in the industry and in government, that are doing this kind of supply chain risk and supply chain security kinds of efforts. So overall, we're trying to move this forward. These are the kind of things we're doing next year. A lot of them are to really harden up the material, get it vetted, get more use cases run through it, and also get more of MITRE using it with more of our customers, but also look for external partners, people who would like to play with this and get to understand it better and see if it can help, if it works for them. So I think with that, the part I thought that the IIC trustworthiness group would really intersect with is in these two areas from the MITRE effort point of view. So think that what we're doing is going to clean up the landscape, make it a little more addressable, learnable, and applicable without as much churn and angst and energy as it currently takes. And I think the only thing I had left was that we are doing a lot of external engagement. After a couple more minutes, I'm going to cross off this first gray one and make it white. But with that, I think I want to offer you that there is a public document about the system of trust, and the software trustworthiness part is available, as I said, in the IIC already. With that, we have plenty of time for questions. Hopefully, many of you have angry comments or interested comments or issues, suggestions. I'm open to them all.
Yeah, so a great presentation and great idea, definitely. So my company, People Systems, we selling components which are made out of other components. So we're in the middle of the supply chain. And I can give you examples of how big, what is a mess today. When you sell a product to a public traded company at Nasdaq or something, they send you a couple of weeks later a list. Tell us where your critical minerals are come from, because there is a law that tell you you cannot. Cannot buy them anymore, but we want to know if you buy some blood diamonds from Congo or whatever. Yeah? And then you have to list this. And this is a mess because we don't know this. We have to ask our supplier, and they have to ask their supplier, and finally it ends in the mine somewhere. So my point is, at first we have to come away from this polling. Permanently ask someone. There must be a list, like you said, best a database where you go in and you see instantly this company has no critical minerals or have critical minerals from this and these countries, and this is automatically centered from their suppliers. So what we need is actually a supplier of supplier chain, and I'm not 100% sure that was demonstrated in your presentation, so as a core thing. But
well,
another example.
I mean, right now I'm just trying to get people to agree on what they would put in such a thing, and then that opens the door to those kinds of automation. Now, some people will say, "Well, I wouldn't make that publicly available." Well, no, just make it part of what you offer to customers or to you ask of those that you
you not make it public available, but you could say MITRE or at least a partner has like Microsoft or someone has a confidential database, and you give your partners an access to this. It has the advantage when your own bank company, for example, is out of business or decide to shut down the database, this information is still available. So that's a big power. And I give you another example. For example, beginning of this year, we get tons of requests. Are your product have some components made in Britain? or made in UK because they're all worried about the Brexit. Yeah, we not get this part suddenly together. So you see, there's a lot of people, they think forward, yeah, about their supply chain, but this is always this weird calling. Yeah, so we need information now. We had a separate department, they investigated that, yeah, and we're waiting that someone answers, and they don't answer because it's annoying. And this is a process that has to need the automation to be more efficient. So I stand totally behind you. And because I sent this to my partner in Germany when you have a white paper, and I asked if he can participate in it.
Yep. No, definitely. I know, Charlie, you're about to disappear. Any comments?
Yeah, I was actually going to try to get a question in there. You guys had a very interesting discussion, though. So I guess my question is, well, one statement. First of all, you are aware of some of the efforts Hitachi's doing, thanks to my endless presentations here. We have a little movie that I mentioned on the last call. Tony and I, Japanese colleagues, for the KO thing next week, and that summarizes what Hitachi's trying to do, and it is, I think, the container, maybe the system container for what you guys are trying to do here. So that's the background.
Listening to you and your colleagues on the calls that we've had, I didn't feel we were going different places.
Right, I agree. I guess my question is the United States government working with the Japanese government in any way on these projects? Because the Japanese government is funding and supporting Hitachi's efforts, among others, in Japan Incorporated. So we are congruent, but in different, like we're going parallel rather than joining. Yep. So far.
Well, and that's part of why I want to reach out is I'm not sure. I mean, this effort to date is funded internally to MITRE, and next year it will also be internally funded. It doesn't mean we're not spinning up things with our customers about it, aligned with it. But it gives us a lot of freedom to who we can talk with. So, I've have no problems working, other countries into this. In fact, this afternoon, I'm going to be on a Asia, Europe, US call. We have a 2-hour window when it's not insane to have that broad an audience.
I know those windows. Really well.
So one point is, as far as I know.
Wait, Marcellus, hang on. You have to run. Sorry about that. Bob, let's get together. I want to show you this movie. It's the best I could do in 5 minutes. And 5 minutes to do the video. All right. Take care, guys. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks very much. Great presentation, Bob.
So as far as I know, this is great that Japan works on this. I think in Germany, Industry 4.0 has a similar initiative. They can remember we had a couple of years ago this when we talked with Bosch about trustworthiness. They have always the solution. You get practical of type of manifest document when you start a production which integrates product in your own production. You get.
Yeah, no, they were very interested about trustworthy partners and
yes, exactly, and that goes in the same direction. And it would be nice if the European community has something. But I would say when you have America, Germany, and Japan together, they're all, I would say, everyone who make production there either import or export stuff. So it is not a good idea to keep this on a national level. It would be good to have an international agreement in this, how it works. Yeah. So I would say, Charlie, is a great opportunity. You have still, I'm sure, contact to Bosch with Dirk Schramer. I would possibly talk with him if he knows something about what they plan. And then finally, that could be something big international. Yeah, and here in IIC, we could coordinate that, and we would definitely get the results out. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the trustworthy framework. I'd like to at least have some of the connection points and some of the context covered. But, some of the other may end up, Bassam, I would think some of it could make sense to have, aspects talked about in some of the, your area. I haven't been at meetings there for a while because I've been so busy on this, but I think there's some resonance there as well.
Yes, so I mean, we started this one graphic. We have to. Bassam is here too. We're still not finished with it. To agree with that. There is the trustworthiness of the system. That is not the same like the trustworthiness, for example, in the management, and it's not the same like the trustworthiness in the supply chain. But they interact. The one trustworthiness is dependent on the other in all the regions. And we need this separated. And when you look a little deeper, the supply chain in the trustworthiness have possibly other priorities and parameters, and maybe there is more stuff than the 5 elements. But even things like privacy are there. Yeah, when someone mess up a production, some production, and the receiver from this failed parts want to need more details, you cannot just say, oh, that was my colleague James whatever, and he his wife was pregnant and that's why he was a bit nervous. Yeah,
Yeah.
That privacy stuff. So even a supply chain have some level of privacy you cannot deliver. Yeah, and that has
So
also individual part,
privacy
yeah?
is confidentiality as well.
Yeah. So Francois had his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Robert. And I have now understand all your comments in the previous discussions.
I'm nothing if not consistent.
So this is really fantastic. And what I was talking about yesterday during the brainstorming session was essentially addressing one of or two or three few aspects of this enormous picture and how to address trustworthiness in those contexts. And it's about automating some aspects so that it's more trustable, I would say. So
Yes.
what I was proposing was really a small bit of what the whole concept you have, but it would be more on making it happen as part of a big ecosystem.
Right. So for Marcellus and Frederick, yesterday, Francois was talking about, basically trustworthiness of software as a and deploy nothing about the insides of the software, but rather it as a item that works through supply chain into your organization, gets refreshed, just like changing the oil in an engine or something. And I offered that this was in the security session. And I offered that the trustworthiness task group would be the appropriate place for Francois to bring that work and work with us. So that's what he's talking about.
Yeah, I was not participating this yesterday, unfortunately, but yeah, that's we have our best practices, and when we see here the white paper, and when Francois has put the additional inputs for that, we could make an update. Yeah, so we could say, okay, there's stuff missing.
Great minds think alike, Marcellus. That was basically what I offered up, is for them to look at the paper on the right here and offer up a new slice to it that address those aspects.
Yeah, and I think what we also could think about is the definition of trustworthiness in vocabulary at the moment is just trustworthiness, but this is actually trustworthiness of a system. We can discuss it's an IoT system or a system. So we can also discuss the trustworthiness in general as a definition. What I don't really think we need it because it's in a vocabulary explained that everyone gets it. But we could also definitely explain the trustworthiness of a supply chain. Yeah, and that is definitely the industrial content. Yeah. So I think a lot of IoT things are really supply chain related, even when we don't see this. But we see in future in real time that my product has produced. I can give you a short example. When you buy a Ferrari, they send you an email. Here is your car in the production. Yeah, you really can see my car. I get in 6 weeks or something is produced here. And I thought Italy, why Mercedes and Ford is not doing this? Yeah, this is all doable. Yeah, and this is it is not direct supply chain. It is not B2B, but this is definitely IIoT. Yeah, you have that.
So, Mitch, you got your hand up?
Yes. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Bob, actually, I'm really impressed. We talk about this, or I've seen your earlier presentation on this, and actually, I'd like to congratulate you. Like I say, this version is much more mature, and then it's actually much more presentable as well. So my question is that say in this model, right? This supply chain security system of trust. I can concur that the core of your system is actually this risk model manager, and I also have to notice that this risk model manager depends heavily on this profile. So is it fair to say that, like I say, the confidence level of your whole system actually depends on how great or how accurately or how detailed you can create this profile? Because I'm thinking, like, for example, from a human's perspective, like we talk about, is this person is trustworthy or not? Then we normally look at a word called integrity. And then integrity is a function of experience, education, moral level, also the things. And then in a way, we kind of build a profile of the person as well. So do you follow a similar approach for your system? Thank you.
Right. So we're still, exploring how to apply the profile idea. Conceptually, it is take this huge pile of things you could be considering and risks you could be exploring, bring it down to something manageable within your, the kind of system, your organization, and so on. So we are going to do a lot of pilots to help us explore how to build good profiles. But at the end of the day, we can also say, here's a profile. Now I'm going to add a couple things and delete a couple things.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
Because this is how I investigate a company. Because they're doing only this kind of thing, I want to explore these areas as well. Or
Great.
I don't care about these areas. So we need to have that ability to tailor, but we don't want to make it that you feel like you need to go grab every knob and dial yourself, but rather that there's a good safe starting point, and then if you really understand your problem, you can tweak it.
Wonderful. Yeah. A follow up on this one is that so like I say, when you present at the current version, the end user need to just base on each characteristics or each attribute to evaluate when you got this report. I'm wondering that is it worthwhile to maybe assign some kind of like a weightings so that you can have a objective measure for something? For example, you have a supplier. Yeah.
So if you
go ahead.
If you download the paper, it has the model in it, and you'll see that there's a bunch of weighting and ways of adjusting. Right now, in the pilot phase, we did no weighting, but we know from other things we've done. I have a an assessment approach I've been using since 1992. And, questions have either general importance, lesson, or more than, and then they go into factors that are, have certain percentage contribution weights. So we support all of that, but we haven't gone in and played with any of them yet. That's for
Great.
phase 2.
Yeah.
But there are definitely things we're going to be doing. So
Right.
I really look forward to talking with all of you and working with you on how we can leverage this and any feedback you have. And I personally have to give a different pitch about this to another part of my management at the top of the hour. So I would like to close this session a little early, and I appreciate all your sticking in and talking to you later.